Good morning. You're listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I'm your host, Doug Dennison. We are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city, at WFOY 1240 AM studios. It's also being streamed on live on 1240 News, and will also be on RyleAuctions.com because they are the host and sponsor, and the show will be posted on YouTube. We've got some exciting guests. It's an all-star cast. Very, very excited. We're going to be talking about the government surplus properties, and our first caller is on. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yeah, this is Billy Long.
Hey, Congressman Long, thank you so much for calling in. You've been on my show before, and it's always a pleasure, sir. How are things going up in Washington?
Well, finally, pretty good. We finally passed the Bipartisan Jobs Act yesterday. Hopefully it'll be a real relief to small businesses, cut out a lot of the regulations and red tape so that people can actually get folks back to work in this country, and it's one of the few bipartisan things we've done. About the only other bipartisan thing we'll do up here is we will ride the elevators together. But other than that, it's a pretty partisan place.
Well, I'm hoping, as you are, we were up there, Tommy Ryle and myself were up there, and you graciously hosted us in your office and talked about the different things that are going around in Washington, and one of the things was this government surplus properties and
right.
and how it needs to be sold, help balance the budget. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm actually a co-sponsor of that, and that's H.R. 1734, what we call this Civilian Property Realignment Act, and it allows for the sale of public property on the open market, hopefully talking auctions on a lot of this property, which would be the fairest and best way, and hand it over to the professionals to be sold. And it allows for the administrator of the general services to prevent the sale of any land that would be suitable for a public park or recreation area, that type of thing. But there's just so much excess property sitting around office buildings and proposed office buildings, one sitting in California, one tract of land that's worth a fortune, just the land. And they've been talking about building a new courthouse on it forever, and it just sits vacant for 10, 15 years. And back in '09, which I guess 3 years ago, they estimated that the federal government spent $1.7 billion with a B dollars operating unnecessary buildings that are just mothballed buildings we don't need, vacant land, vacant buildings. So what this does is H.R. 1734, it creates a 9-member commission that'll go in and review the federal properties and recommend specific actions on which ones definitely need to be sold. Of course, we have high hopes that there'll be a bunch of them sold off, and it would require the commission to recommend the sale of at least $500 million in assets in the first 180 days of its operation.
Well, that's very, very big and very, very important. And I thank you for being a co-sponsor. You are a past auctioneer and from the state of Missouri. Tell us about your business and how long you were an auctioneer, sir.
I started out in the late 70s. If you remember, there was a guy named Jimmy Cotta that was president, and I was a realtor in those days. Interest rates were 16, 17, 18% on a home loan, and you couldn't give away a house. So I thought, well, why couldn't you figure out how to auction these? And went up to the Missouri Auction School in Kansas City and came back, and just like everybody else, started selling pots and pans and dishes and utensils and grandma's antiques, and worked my way up and started selling some real estate. And then by the end of my career, 30-some years later, finally the majority of our business was real estate auctions. So provided a real good living for my family over the years, and just kind of found my niche in the auction business.
Well, you were also a radio announcer. Tell us about that, sir.
That was another. I was kind of like Jerry Clower, if you remember the old country comedian. I kind of backed into show business. I advertised my auction business on the radio. We had a country music station there, and then it later turned to talk radio. And I would get real good response. The ads were very inexpensive on an AM radio station advertising my auction company, and my ads were always kind of colloquial. I just get on there and talk for 30 seconds or 60 seconds and always tell a story within my ads, and people caught on to it, and then they needed somebody to co-host the morning show, and I'd kind of mentioned half-jokingly one day that I might, come in and fill in one day if the guy got sick. Well, 10 days later, he went home and passed away at 58 years old, and they remembered I'd asked to try out, so they said, well, come in here, and we want to give you a shot next week, and we want you to do a week. And I'm like, a week? 5 days? I don't have enough material for 5 days. I just want to do a day. No, we need you to do the whole week. And then they tried out these other people, and being a local guy and knowing all the old streets and buildings and what used to be here and used to be there kind of helped me, I think, and I've got a fairly good sense of humor. I think people kind of appreciate it, and so they tried out several different people, and then the week turned into 3 weeks and 3 months and 3 years and 6 years, so I did it for 6 years, 3 hours every morning, Monday through Friday. So that really helped me in my run for Congress, too, was that name ID. The first time we did any polling to see what my name ID was, it was off the charts compared to two state senators I was running against and a prosecuting attorney from the largest county in the district. That you would have thought all those guys would have had better name ID than me, but people just don't realize how powerful radio is.
Well, it is powerful, and I've been blessed to be on this show, and I've been doing radio for about 4 or 5 years, so I know how you feel. Listen, you have two great people that I've been working with in your office, Brett Funk and also Curtis Trent, so it's so important to have good people on your staff up there. Tell us how you got into politics and why you did it.
I wanted to do this originally back in the 90s when this congressional seat came open. As a practical matter, unless it's an open seat, it's very, very tough to unseat an incumbent. And when this seat came open back in the 90s, in my heart I wanted to do it, but in my head it wasn't a practical matter because our girls were 7 and 10, and so I didn't want to raise them up in D.C. or try and be a long-distance dad, be up here 4 or 5 days a week and then be home on the weekend, so I didn't make the run at that time. But I wanted to run then for the same reason I wanted to run this time, and that is that I think the Founding Fathers envisioned citizen legislators, people that would leave their business at home where they'd actually run a business, come to D.C., stay a few years, and then turn around and go back home and live under the laws that we create instead of making it a lifetime gig. And that was my motivation for running back in the 90s and this time. And when our U.S. Senator Kit Bond decided to hang it up and Roy Blunt, our congressman, decided to run for Kit's seat, which he did win successfully, he's now U.S. Senator. When he decided to do that, I jumped in the race and said, hey, I'm in, and I just worked hard for a couple of years and went to every event that folks told me to go to and tried to get the word out there that, hey, we need to send a citizen to Washington, need to send people with a background in business and people that have signed the front of a check, and it worked out real well for us.
Well, we talked a little bit about auctions in your auction past. Tell us, you've been a big supporter of the National Auctioneers Association. Give us some idea why auctions are good for government sales.
Well, they absolutely need to be. Any government sale, I push every day to have them sold at public auction. Back in the RTC days, they did that. They hired auction companies to come in, and they're professionals. They know what they're doing. They know how to market, how to advertise. And the fallacy, of course, with any auctioneer, you go to an event here of an evening, if they maybe have a reception downstairs or the Farmers Bureau's in town or the Independent Insurance Agency or whatever it is, and as soon as I walk in the room, everybody says, oh, here's the congressman that's an auctioneer. Hey, let us hear you auction. They always want you to auction, and I'm always like, this guy over there in the corner, he's also a congressman, but he happens to be a brain surgeon. You wouldn't want to see him perform his trade right here, would you? But, so people think that fast talking's all there is to auctioneering, and that's just a complete fallacy. The marketing, the preparation, knowing who to reach out to, how to get a big crowd there. And unfortunately, the GSA moved away from hiring auctioneers and started having folks at the GSA actually become auctioneers. Well, that's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. It'd be like saying, well, we've got this health insurance policy and you need a little dental work done. We could send you over there to the dentist, but really this guy sitting next to you in his GSA desk, yeah, he'd probably make a pretty good dentist, so we're just going going to have him pull that tooth for you. So that's the type of behavior we want to stop and get them back to where they're hiring professional auctioneers.
Well, I of course agree with that, and hopefully private sector auctioneers, professional auctioneers can work with the GSA to do auctions. It's very important to get these properties off the books because they're terrible for the taxpayer, because besides the fact that not doing anything, and they're a blight certainly in different areas and hurt the area because they're abandoned and sometimes
right.
for
many
flop
houses and drug houses and
for many years. But what about the fact that it cost a whole bunch of money to keep these properties intact and secure and maintain them? And I don't believe many people understand that it cost a lot of money and that the taxpayers are paying for it.
Well, just like your granddad taught you, you're just throwing good money after bad, and that's those things. They served a purpose. They had their day, but maybe it was an office building in a part of town that had 180 employees, and now that agency has moved across town, and they have 3,600 employees. So you've got a building sitting over there that once did great work for 180 employees, and now those days have come and gone. Some buildings last forever, and others don't, and the ones that don't are the ones that are sitting around. And also, like I said, out there in California, we're sitting on a very valuable piece of ground that they've been trying to build a federal courthouse in the Los Angeles area forever. And obviously, if 15, 20 years pass, they're not going to get that thing built. We might as well turn around and sell that, and put that into, or apply that to the debt that this $15 trillion in debt that we find ourselves in.
Well, I think it's one step at a time, and certainly if we can sell these unused government surplus properties and it helps balance the budget in a small way, I think that's a great PR move for legislators, congressmen, senators. How are you guys? I know you said that it wasn't working well together, but is there any hope for the future as far as the
There is actually hope on this bill. I'm not going to say that it's, we do see light at the end of the tunnel on it, but, we're not sure if that's daylight or whether that's a train coming the other way. But it's such a common sense measure. You hope that we can, in committee on it, in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, which is where we're handling it, there's folks that argue, they could turn this into a museum for the arts, or you could donate this to there and whatever. But hopefully we can get it through the Senate, get the president to sign it, and get some auctioneers out there rattling this stuff off.
Well, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. If you could give some of us voters and citizens some advice, what can we do? We feel like we're helpless, and how can we do something to assist you and assist the good bills and tell basically legislators that they need to get together, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, for the betterment of the country? How do we do that as just a regular old voter?
The best way to do it is get involved in the political side of the game, because this year in particular, like any presidential election year, there is very, very little legislation that's going to pass or anything get done this year. It's going to be all pointed towards that November date, to where either we leave the Senate in the hands of the Democrats and we leave the White House in the hands of the Democrats, or whether we turn it to the Republicans. So depending on what side of the equation you're on, if you're a Republican, and let's say you're a Republican that lives in a very Democratic district, and you'll never have a Republican congressman, you'll never have a Republican senator, but you can get involved with the national party and help make calls. I know when Scott Brown was running for Ted Kennedy's old seat, there was people in Missouri that were calling from their home for Scott Brown in Massachusetts, making calls, encouraging people to get out the vote. So you can really work in your party. Same goes for the Democrats. If you have Democrat listeners and they know they're in a heavily Republican area and their congressman will never be a Democrat or senator and they want to work for the Democrats, but I would just suggest getting involved involved with the party this year in particular, because if we can pick up the Senate and pick up the White House, then we can actually start getting serious about cutting down on this runaway spending. And, of course, so much of what we spend are mandatory spending on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. That takes up over half of our entire budget before we spend on anything else. So we just need more like-minded people up here that know that we can't run around with $15 trillion debt millstone around our neck. Hey, I'm going to have to get off here.
Yep.
I appreciate your time. And
thank you so
having me
much
on your show, and I may holler at you offline sometime. I've got some other auctioneer buddies around the country that might make real good guests on here for you.
That'd be great, Congressman. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Good morning. You're on the air. Okay, we just missed one caller. Hopefully they'll call in again. Congressman Long from the state of Missouri up in Washington, D.C., took the time to call in today, and very much appreciate that he's working so hard for this government surplus property movement to sell surplus properties. This is very, very important. We've got to sell properties that aren't being used. Not only can we sell them and give that money to the budget so that we can help balance the budget, but paying taxes on and paying security, insurance, being careful about vandalism, that costs money, even though the building isn't being used. And so that is something that we can't handle as taxpayers. And I'll talk a little bit later about a post office up in Washington, D.C. that hasn't been used for 10 years, but every year it costs $6 million a year to secure, to maintain. And that's $60 million that we are paying for. Just not good common sense. We've got a caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Doug. JJ Dower.
Hey, JJ. Thank you so much for calling. You are the Vice President of the National Auctioneers Association and the CEO of MarkNet Alliance. You wear a lot of hats. Tell us what is happening with the NAA and also MarkNet Alliance just for a second.
Well, a little update on the NAA. It's getting to be the busy time of the year. The upcoming conference and show is in Spokane, Washington in July.
Okay.
All the state associations have just kind of finished their winter conventions, so we've been on the road a lot visiting the different states, and now getting ready to head, I guess it'd be time to head into the summer conventions here shortly.
Well, you do this all voluntarily, too. Is that correct?
All voluntarily.
You're the man.
Next big function for NAA will be CAI. Is coming up at the University of Indiana in Bloomington, actually starting week from Sunday, I guess.
Well, great. Tell us about...
It's time to be in Indiana.
You're amazing. Tell us quickly about... You're the CEO of MarkNet Alliance. What is MarkNet Alliance?
MarkNet Alliance, Doug, is a group of auctioneers throughout the country. We have 50 member firms in 27 states, I think, now. And we do basically 5,000 auctions a year, and probably today online there's 20,000 items available to buy online today. And out of the 5,000 auctions we do, typically 3,500 to 4,000 of them are online-only auctions, so you can bid from anywhere in the country. We sell a lot of bank, government-type assets in an online-only format. And we have some great members, guys who are second, third generation auction companies, been around 50 or 60 years, and just share like-minded business practices.
Well, it's obvious that you're a leader in the auction industry. You have been following my show you've been on for, I'm going to say 3 or 4 times. I thank you so much for again calling in. We just had Congressman Long on the show. We talked about this government surplus property issue. Give us your feeling on government surplus properties and how auctions can play a part here.
Yeah, Doug, I mean, I see the auction industry as a great way to solve some of the problems, not only inside of government liquidating their assets, but an opportunity to offer those assets that are currently dead weight sitting around with no use. Plus, you know, all the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac stuff. I mean, these assets don't need to be sold in bulk bundles. They need to be sold to individuals in the open outcry process where it's a public auction and anyone can attend and let everybody have a piece of the American dream. And it's a great way to turn a non-performing asset into something that's on the local tax rolls and people are using and getting the full benefit of enjoying.
Well, I agree completely. Congressman Long, a former auctioneer from Missouri, just spoke eloquently on what we can do to get involved and try to get this moved. H.R. 1734 just got passed by the House. Now it needs to go to the Senate, and I'm sure they're going to tweak it. But the main point is that taxpayers can't afford properties that are just sitting there and costing us money, and I know you know that.
You've hit it right on the head, Doug. And it's not only the fact that the taxpayers are paying for those non-performing assets. Your local counties and states are not receiving any property tax revenues off of these assets. You know, it's just dead weight for the states. Now, states and local governments all need taxes being paid also. So, you know, if you take these things off non-tax paying rolls and put them in individuals' hands who's suddenly improving the property and paying taxes, they're increasing the values of the neighborhood and everything else. I mean, it's just a win-win for us all.
Well, it is. JJ, thank you so much for taking time on this Friday. You can be reached at marknetalliance.com. You've been a great leader for the industry. Thank you so much for calling in.
All right, Doug. Always good to hear from you. Say hello to your next guest there, my old buddy.
I will.
I'll talk to you later.
Thanks,
care.
Doug. Well, that was J.J. Dower, Vice President of the National Auctioneers Association and CEO of MarkNet Alliance. He's from Tennessee, is involved in his own company, and I thank him for calling in. We've got more guests, more excitement in regards to what's happening with government surplus properties. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. All right, we are back. You're listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I'm your host, Doug Dennison. We have had quite a show. We've had Congressman Billy Long from the state of Missouri up in Washington, D.C. today. He's a former auctioneer. He talked about the government process, talked about auctions, talked about H.R. 1734, which is a House bill that's been recently passed that is going to try to sell these properties that are unused and surplus, costing taxpayers millions and millions and millions of dollars. I heard the B word, the $1 billion word from Congressman Long, and it is just amazing that we can't do this common sense thing. Then we had J.J. Dower. He's the Vice President of the National Auctioneers Association and CEO of MarkNet Alliance. He's out of Tennessee and talked about the value of auctions, the fairness of auctions, the transparency of auctions, and how, again, it's just good common sense if we can get these properties off the books. There's been estimates of at least 14,000 properties that can be sold, and auctions and the private sector, professional auctions, have been in business for years and years is the way to go. JJ also talked about a very important thing in saying we need to sell these individually. Okay, this is not a time where we say, okay, you Wall Street company, you sell these 1,000 properties. You other New York Wall Street companies sell this 1,000 properties, and that will be the fastest and the quickest way. It will be the fastest and quickest way, but it's not the right way. And the right way is to do these individually. These are to do them with private sector auctioneers. And let me take the next call. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. This is Congressman Jeff Denham.
Well, Congressman Denham, thank you so much. We've been talking about you on this show for actually several months. We've been praising you and all the work you've done on H.R. 1734. Tell us a little bit about that bill.
Well, this is a common sense bill if you ever saw one. This is one that both Republicans and Democrats should agree on rather than arguing about raising taxes or making cuts to government. This is just a way to say we're going to do things smarter. Let's take all of these buildings that are sitting vacant, sitting empty around the nation, and let's either redevelop them so that we can create jobs, or let's sell them off so that we bring in the revenue to reduce our debt and create jobs in the process as well. So it's a good bill that will help us redefine the way that our government's run. I believe that our government is too big, and on the short term, I think that we can redevelop or sell a number of these properties, saving us about $15 billion immediately. But long term, if you really want to shrink the size of government, you have to know how many employees we have across the nation, how many different employees each agency has, and how much square footage they're utilizing. So we're going to take this bill and this footprint and be able to say, so many square feet per person across the nation, so that we can really create some efficiencies and again sell off the ones we don't need, identify the ones that are underutilized, and if you've got two buildings that are both 50% occupied, why not combine them and then be able to either lease out the other building or sell it off? So this bill just gives us a framework to start making good decisions.
Well, you said a great word, common sense, and if you're a private business person, I mean, if you had a property that you weren't using, in some cases for years, and yet you're paying every year to maintain that property, that would just be stupid. And the government needs to really take advantage of this common sense thing that if you're not using these properties, sell them. And it's, again, common sense. Tell us about the post office, because you've got a victory on that one up in Washington, D.C., I heard.
Absolutely. The post office, the old post office in Washington, D.C. is a great success story. Here you've had a building that has sat vacant for well over a decade now. It has taken 2 acts of Congress to actually get Department of General Services to move on this. And now after holding 2 different hearings in this old abandoned area of the old post office, we finally got them to put it out to bid. And when they put it out to bid, it was amazing. You've got this historic, one of the most historic buildings in our nation. I mean, if you go to look at the pictures of Washington, D.C., or if you visit our nation's capital, it's one of the tallest buildings. It's got the big clock on it. I mean, it's a historic building that we not only want to make sure we keep it historic, but that people can actually go up into that clock tower as they've been able to do for decades. And so once we put this out to bid, we had Waldorf Astoria, we had Hilton, we had Marriott, we had Donald Trump, a whole long list of people that immediately came and said, yes, we want to redevelop it. And recently, Donald Trump actually won the bid, and he's going to come in and redevelop this into a beautiful hotel with some retail shops that will actually not only keep the clock tower open, but create a great national monument, national visitor center that people will actually be able to enjoy it much better than they can today. So we have taken something that costs us $6.5 million. We pay out $6.5 million every single year just in an ongoing maintenance of this property. And now we're going to get $25 million plus each year in rental payments, and have a historic building that is redone. The federal government could not afford to go in and rehabilitate this building, but now that we've got a private developer coming in, we're going to be able to do that. So we're taking a net negative of $6.5 million, turning it into a net positive, bringing in $25 million, and on an annual basis, and we're creating 300 jobs in the process. I mean, if you ever had something that should be bipartisan and a way to streamline government and cut costs and get rid of waste, this is it.
Well, I'm waving the flag because that is an unbelievable story, and the numbers of how much it costs to maintain a building, I don't think the average taxpayer realizes how much it costs. And so you've been doing a great job, and now you're from California. Did you do this type of thing in California to help the state of California?
Absolutely. In fact, California is a big mess with its real estate portfolio. I helped to change that while I was in the state Senate. But I'm one of those business guys that came into office and said, you know, well, one party's saying cut expenses, and the other party's saying raise taxes. I said, wait a minute, you can't do either one of those in my business. What do we own? You know, do we have to sell off some of the things? Can we lease out some of the things? I mean, you start making some good business decisions. And so some of the big things that California owns are like the LA Coliseum and the sports arena and the Cow Palace, things that the state government should not own. They should be regional or private venues. Or San Quentin, which is the most expensive prison in the nation to run and is a $2 billion waterfront property that if you sold it off, not only would you be able to have the redevelopment in the Bay Area right on the waterfront property, but you could build 4 new prisons for what it would, state-of-the-art prisons. So California is a mess, too. We did some of the similar things that we're trying to do here with the federal government, bringing it all under the Department of General Services there, just like we're bringing it under GSA here, so that you have one person to hold accountable to. If, you know, an agency is not selling off their property or not getting the right efficiencies, then we've got one person we can hold accountable now under my bill. That's the same thing we did in the state government. So California, the state, has a long way to go, but they're now on the right track. I know that other states are in the same situation with their state-owned properties, but from a federal perspective, you know, I was amazed, and I think your listeners would be amazed too. We just initially, our initial search was 14,000 properties that were excess or underutilized properties. Mm-hmm. That's just by starting out. That doesn't include, you know, there are huge 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 square foot courtrooms that are sitting vacant in a lot of the big cities right now. I mean, there are a lot of properties that we need to move that aren't on this list. So what this bill will do, we'll set up a separate commission to evaluate all of these different properties across the nation to be able to bring in lump sum of properties back to Congress to vote on an up or down vote on either selling them or redeveloping them, much like we had with the BRAC base realignment and closure that realigned all of our different bases based on a strategic purpose rather than from a congressional purpose of, you know, everybody's going to fight for their own district, but is it really the right decision for our country?
Well, that's excellent news. You got it passed in the House. Now, what happens next? A lot of my listeners are, of course, real estate people, but it's the general public. What happens next, and when it goes to the Senate, how does that work? And do you guys both tweak it together, or what happens, Congressman Denham?
Well, a couple of different things could happen. What we'd like to see happen is the Senate just say, wow, that's a great bill, that's common sense, it makes sense, the President wants it, so we're going to pass this and send it to the President. The simple thing would be for him to take it and sign it into law.
Okay.
We're told that he wants this bill. We've been working with the administration to work out the tweaks that they'd like to see in it, but ultimately, you know, this should not be a partisan bill. The other option would be to have the Senate send us a bill. So now that we've got our bill in the Senate, if they send us a bill that may be slightly different, then it goes to conference, and we all sit down between the two houses, and there would be a small conference committee that would work out the details of the bill, and then that would come out of conference and go directly to the President. We're happy with either one of those scenarios. We just want to make sure that this is done quickly so that we can start taking advantage not only of putting people back to work, but reducing our debt in the process.
Well, it's an excellent idea, and I hope it works. Why did you get into politics, Congressman?
I was frustrated with the direction that our country's going in. I mean, our debt is too big, and this is the first time in my life where I've been worried that my kids would not have the same opportunities that my parents and grandparents I inherited from them. So I want to see our country change. I want to get rid of this debt. We shouldn't be carrying this debt or relying on other countries to, pay for, the things that we're spending money on.
No, I agree. I actually listened to you on the House floor on C-SPAN, and I don't think everyone knows how difficult it is and how patient you must be to get these bills passed, and everybody has their own interest, and how you do it is really amazing. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact you've got great staff. I've been to your office several times, worked with Brett Manley, and now just got to know Allie Brandenberger. But I guess it's just like any business. You need to have great people.
Absolutely. You got to have a strong team to help you move things forward. I mean, I couldn't do this without Allie communicating on a national perspective. And, Brett's the one who's been driving the policy. So you really have to have a strong team to make sure that it's getting all the way through the process. There's a lot of different roadblocks that get thrown up. It's how you get around those roadblocks that really matters.
What can we do as just regular citizens? Because if everybody knew about this, that the government and therefore us paying for it, the taxpayers, we're wasting, billions of dollars. How do we do something to make your work easier?
Well, two things that we're asking listeners to do. First, and most importantly, call your U.S. Senator. We're trying to make sure that every state is calling their U.S. Senator so their senator is aware of the issue, and we actually get it up for a vote here very quickly. The other thing would be to voice your support at our office, and our website is denham.house.gov. That's denham.house.gov, and that'll help us to continue to get this moving as well.
Well, that's a great idea. You also have a weekly update that I find very interesting, and I look forward to it every Friday when I get it. You email it out. It's free. How do people get on that list too, Congressman Denham?
The same way. If they go to denham.house.gov, they can sign up for our e-newsletter. Also follow us on Facebook or Twitter. I'm a freshman, but in the short time that I've been here in Congress, we're fighting and we're getting some good things done. So let us know what you think of our ideas, but most importantly, let us know what you're thinking. And again, if you go to denham, denham.house.gov, you can get our e-newsletter, or you can show us that you support the legislation, or even if you have concerns with anything we're doing, we want to hear that as well.
Congressman Denham, I know you guys are very busy. Congressman Long was on earlier in the show, showed his support. I think he was a co-sponsor of the bill. It's exciting work that you're doing. It's very vital for the country that this type of bill gets passed, no matter how it gets done. And I'm glad to see that you're going to be working with everybody to get it done. I'm also glad that the president is for this type of thing, because it's, again, extremely important for the taxpayers of the country.
Absolutely. And let me, before I go, let me give a great shout-out to the great Representative Billy Long. He's a great American and a good friend.
Well, thank you very much. Congressman, again, thank you for calling in and for a great job. Continue doing what you're doing, and I look forward to the success of your programs.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
You bet. Bye-bye now. All right, that was Congressman Denham. So we've had Congressman Billy Long from the state of Missouri. We've had J.J. Dower, Vice President of the National Auctioneers Association, CEO of MarkNet Alliance from Tennessee, on. We've had Congressman Denham. He is the star. He is the sponsor of H.R. 1734. and has done a magnificent job getting that passed by the House. Now it's time to have the Senate get involved. I'm glad the president is in support of this. We need to move this along. This is important for taxpayers, because right now we're paying millions, actually more than $1 billion a year in maintaining properties that are not used and have not been used for several years. It's not good. Let's go for a quick break. We'll be right back.
MarkNet Alliance is a national, membership-based network of 41 auction companies. Our companies are successful auction professionals with proven track records and thriving businesses. The MarkNet companies have a staff of over 540 employees who are working hard every day to meet the goals of their clients during our ever-changing economy. MarkNet companies are able to achieve these goals through cutting-edge technologies and ever-growing investor pools. To view the hundreds of auctions currently being conducted, or for more information, visit marknetalliance.com.
All right, we're back. You're listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. We are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, but streaming it out through 1240news.com live, and also this program will be on rileauctions.com and also youtube.com. We are talking about the government and surplus properties. We have a caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Doug.
Well, Mr. Rowell, thank you so much for calling in. What a show we've had. We've had Congressman Long from Missouri, J.J. Dower from the NAA and MarkNet Alliance, and then Congressman Denham just got off the phone again. As you know, he is the sponsor of H.R. 1734. He's just done a wonderful job in getting this bill passed by the House. You and I, as CEO of Rowell Auctions, went up to Congress and in Washington, D.C., met with a lot of people to find out what was happening with this. Why don't you share some of our stories?
Well, Doug, we found that there was broad-based support for this bill, which is really heartwarming in today's partisan world. To have bipartisanship is really what this country was founded on, to have two different groups hammer out the ideas that would be best. And I believe it was Congressman Denham that I heard earlier that talked about common sense and the utilization of common sense in directing our government in selling these properties to reduce our overall spending in America. And today, our government is very much like our businesses. If a business gets in trouble, in many instances, it needs to sell some of its assets in order to increase liquidity and get that balance sheet back in proper order. So I think that our congressmen, from what we saw on our visit there, are certainly all in support of this very important piece of legislation that can transform America.
Well, we also met with the GSA, the General Service Administration, also the Congressional Budget Office. I got a chance to meet with the GAO, the General Accounting Office. Everybody wants to get this done. Everybody has their own tweaks and everything. But just like you said, this has got to be a priority. And I'm really thrilled that Congressman Denham said that the president is for this, and maybe he can nudge the Senate a little bit. What do you think?
Well, we certainly hope so, and we look forward to just passing the Senate and then being enacted. And as you said, the properties would go to GSA. GSA would be responsible for administering the sale and liquidation of these, and we're encouraging GSA to utilize the private sector to assist in the liquidation and sale of these properties in order to maximize the greatest potential dollar. That's the whole key, and it's not a matter of GSA can't do it, but it's simply in maximizing the return to the taxpayer, and that could be best accomplished through the private sector.
Well, J.J. Dower had something to say. By the way, he gave his best to you, his old friend. But he did say we got to make sure that these properties aren't sold in bundles, like 1,000 at a time, and having Wall Street do it, because that's not the way to do it. Then the next door business who has wanted to buy this property doesn't really have a chance at getting it. And Wall Street becomes a middleman, and they get all the money, and that's just not right. So it needs to be individual auctions, and allow it to be on site and in a ballroom with internet. But this is something that is very important for this country.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Doug. And also, these properties in the past, the surplus properties, they've been passed down to state, county, local municipalities, and some of which have worked out very well. But in many instances, by passing them down through other governmental agencies and municipalities, you're still taking those properties off tax rolls. There's still the burden of maintenance and upkeep that may not be producing the return that it should be. And many of these buildings truly need to go back into the private sector. So that's another good aspect of this bill, is putting properties in the private sector.
You just had a big auction of 250 properties for a bank. How did that go, sir?
Doug, those 250 properties were scattered across 3 states, and we had fabulous participation in that auction. We're seeing investors today that are tired of their money sitting idly in banks, earning 1/4 to 0.5% in interest, and they say real estate's bottomed out. It's a bargain. It's a great investment and a wonderful opportunity to invest and make money. And these investors are taking their time and efforts to do the due diligence to buy these properties at significantly discounted prices, which is putting properties back into the private sector, which will improve our economy long term. And we feel like that we're reaching a bottom in today's real estate values, and that we'll see real estate values begin to turn upward very soon as the economy and employment stabilizes. And we hope to have good employment numbers coming out today. I think they were talking about somewhere about 250,000 new jobs were created in the last 30 days. That's all a benefit to the real estate market.
We've got about 60 seconds left, but the auction that you just did, many properties were absolute. Can you say why that is good for the buyer and for the seller?
Certainly. Absolute auctions produce the greatest amount of interest simply because the buyer knows that if they're the highest and last bidder, they're going to have the ability to purchase that property. And from that standpoint, from a seller standpoint, it produces the maximum amount of bids and the largest return to the seller.
Well, how do we get a hold of Rowell Auctions, Tommy?
There are 2 ways. At RowellAuctions.com, ROWELL auctions.com is our website, or at our toll-free number at 800-323-8388.
Tommy Rowell, CEO of Rowell Auctions in Moultrie, Georgia. Thank you so much, Tommy, and appreciate your time.
Doug, it's been an honor to be with such a distinguished group of call-in folks today.
Take care now.
Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Great show. Two congressmen, CEO of a big auction company, and the National Auctioneers Association MarkNet Alliance. Want to thank everybody for listening. Also, a shout out to my father, 85 years old today. May he and his wife Wanda have many happily married years to go. Take care now.